I didn't lose my marriage the day she cheated, Pahir. I lost it the day I stayed silent.
David always thought marriage was a test of endurance. He believed if you just kept your head down, worked hard, and loved quietly, everything would fall into place. For years, this belief was the glue holding his world together, helping him ignore the tiny, spreading cracks in his marriage to Bonnie. She was the life of every party, vibrant, ambitious, and lately incredibly distant. He, on the other hand, had become cautious, weighing every word, terrified that one wrong move, one honest conversation, would push her away for good. The first warning signs were easy to explain away. Bonnie started coming home late. Long meetings, she'd say, or last-minute errands that just couldn't wait. Her wardrobe changed too. She began to dress with a newfound confidence, a style that felt jarring when she'd barely glance his way at the end of the day. When David tried to be close to her, to feel that connection they once had, she would gently push him away. "I'm just so tired," she'd sigh, or "work has been brutal." Each rejection was a small cut, but he told himself it was just a phase, a rough patch that all couples go through. He just had to be patient. But one Friday evening, the air in their home felt heavier, thicker. Bonnie had supposedly taken the day off to go shopping. Yet she walked through the door hours late, her hands completely empty, not a single shopping bag in sight. But she was glowing, radiant in a way he hadn't seen in years. And he knew, deep down, that glow had nothing to do with him. When he gently asked about her day, her response was sharp, defensive. "Why are you so insecure?" she snapped. The conversation died right there, swallowed by a thick, uncomfortable silence. But his unease didn't die. It grew sharper, more insistent. Later that night, lying in bed, the space between them felt like a canyon. Bonnie turned to him, her touch mechanical, her affection feeling more like a chore she needed to check off her list. It was cold, empty, and for the first time David refused. He realized in that moment that her pity was far more painful than her rejection. He lay awake for hours, the movie of the last few months playing on a loop in his mind. A painful pattern emerged. Their intimacy, their connection had been reduced to a routine, one that revolved entirely around her schedule, her whims, and never his needs. The next morning, a headline on the newspaper caught his eye. A celebrity couple was getting divorced. The article spoke of trust, betrayal, and the heavy price of pretending. As he read the words, something inside David shifted, like a lock finally clicking open. He understood, with a clarity that was both terrifying and liberating, that ignoring the truth wouldn't save his family. It would only cost him his self-respect. That evening he approached Bonnie. His voice was calm, steady, devoid of the fear that had silenced him for so long. He laid it all out, the late nights, the flimsy excuses, the emotional Grand Canyon between them. Then he looked her straight in the eye and asked the question that had been haunting him. "Is there someone else?" At first she laughed, a hollow, brittle sound. She called him paranoid, dramatic, but her eyes told a different story. They darted away, unable to meet his gaze. When he stood his ground, silent and unwavering, her laughter turned to anger, then to a chilling coldness, and finally to silence. That silence was louder than any confession. A few days later, they found themselves at a dinner party with their closest friends. The tension was a third guest at their table, a shadow that followed them everywhere. The conversation turned to the future, to vacations and plans. When it was his turn, David's words hung in the air. "I can't promise anything anymore," he said quietly. His friends, confused, pressed him to explain. He took a deep breath and said it. "I think Bonnie is cheating on me. You could have heard a pin drop." The friendly chatter vanished. Bonnie's face went from pale to a deep, burning red, a mix of fury and pure, unadulterated fear. David then made a simple, public request. He asked Bonnie to hand over her phone, just to clear her name. He promised that if he was wrong, if she was innocent, he would apologize to everyone right there and they would move on. But if he was right, he would leave. The room held its breath. Bonnie was frozen, trapped in the spotlight of his quiet demand. It felt like an eternity passed before she moved. Then, in a sudden, jerky motion, she grabbed her purse, pushed her chair back, and ran out of the house, leaving a trail of shattered silence behind her. And that was it. That was the only confirmation David needed. She came home later that night, the anger replaced by a flood of tears. She confessed everything. The affair, she sobbed, was just a mistake, a temporary escape from the pressures of life. It meant nothing, she insisted. She begged him to understand, to forgive her, to think of their children. David listened to every word, his face a mask of calm. He didn't interrupt, didn't argue. He just listened as the woman he loved tried to explain away her betrayal. But somewhere deep inside him, a switch had been flipped. The part of him that would have done anything to make it work had gone quiet. Love without respect, he now knew, wasn't love at all. It was just a cage. The aftermath was swift and messy, the truth unraveled with brutal speed. The man she had been seeing was also married. When his wife found out, the fallout was catastrophic. Jobs were lost, reputations were destroyed, and lifelong friendships were fractured overnight. The fantasy world Bonnie had built for herself crumbled, and she found herself completely alone, abandoned by the very person for whom she had risked everything. David filed for divorce. There was no drama, no shouting matches, no vengeful games. His focus was singular: protect his children and start rebuilding his own life from the ground up. He moved into a temporary apartment, and for the first time in years, he started to rediscover himself. He found his confidence again, slowly realizing just how much of his own identity he had sacrificed in the name of keeping the peace. The pain was still there, a dull ache in his chest, but it no longer had control over him. Months passed. One day his phone rang. It was Bonnie. Her voice was different, softer, stripped of all its former arrogance. She spoke of regret, of a profound loneliness, of the life she had so carelessly thrown away. David listened, and when she was done, he wished her well, genuinely, but he couldn't go back. He chose not to reopen wounds that were only just beginning to scar over. Some lessons, he now understood, had to be permanent. Looking back, David no longer saw his story as just a tale of betrayal. It was a story of awakening. It was the story of a man who learned that real strength isn't loud or aggressive. It's quiet, it's firm, and it's rooted in self-respect. He didn't need revenge to reclaim his dignity. He didn't need to win. Walking away with clarity was his victory. And in that quiet, deliberate decision to choose himself, he finally, truly found peace. Thank you for listening, and if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more.